You're listening to The World at 8 with Lynn Mozart. The World at 8, the number one in nationalist news.
Highlights of the news today, Wednesday the 3rd of April. Peterborough, police smash biggest child sex ring in the UK. Justice Minister admits we will not change human rights law. Jobless Iraqi benefit queen sublets £2 million flat for £4,000 a week. Pesaro, Italy, extreme right political group seals off makeshift mosque. France and Germany snub Cameron on EU law review. Bison will roam forests in Germany again. Arabs have black slaves today. Only in America is the threat of Islam ignored. Victoria's secret hypersexualises teenage girls. Thought for the day, is there a Brit cultural shift? And finally, the bacon condom has arrived. UK news. Peterborough. Police smash biggest child sex ring in the UK. Buried in the Mirror and Peterborough Telegraph over the Easter weekend is the announcement by Cambridgeshire Police that 6 men have been arrested for being part of the largest child sex ring in UK history. The reports say 6 men of various nationalities have been arrested as part of the Cambridgeshire Police operations Earl and Jardine. The ongoing operations have so far uncovered almost 50 alleged victims of rape, abuse and sex slavery, aged as young as 12 years. Detectives fear those numbers could easily reach more than 100 in a case potentially bigger than the Rochdale grooming scandal, where a gang of Asian men abused 47 victims from troubled backgrounds. Our source said the investigation has only just started, but this could be the worst child sex slave ring the country has seen so far. The suspects were released on police bail. Justice Minister admits we will not change human rights law. Justice Minister Damien Green, in response to a question from Labour former Home Secretary David Blunkett, Mr Green said, as set out in the coalition agreement, the government remains committed to the European Convention on Human Rights and has no plans to denounce or withdraw from it. Home Secretary Theresa May and Tory Vice Chairman Michael Fabricant both want to ditch it to make it easier to deport foreign terrorists and criminals, especially after her humiliating court defeat for the government over its attempts to kick out hate preacher Abu Qatada has thrown the convention back into the spotlight. Senior opposition figures concede that, as a result of the Qatada case, there is a growing clamour to reform human rights laws. Jobless Iraqi benefit queen sublets £2 million flat for £4,000 a week. An unemployed Iraqi benefit queen charged £4,000 a week to sublet a taxpayer-funded £2 million flat, it's been claimed. Bushra al-Rahimi is claimed to have rented out the flat to a family of Kuwaiti tourists, while also being in receipt of housing benefits from Westminster City Council to cover the cost of the city centre 5-bedroom property. Al-Rahimi and her family have now been rehoused at taxpayers' expense in nearby Islington, in a block of flats where another property is let at £5,000 a month. European news. Pesaro, Italy. Extreme right political group seals off makeshift mosque. Italian news agencies are reporting Forza Nuova blocks Muslim community from using gym for worship. They're claiming that members of the neo-fascist political party Forza Nuova, who sealed off a gym being used by the local Muslim community as a mosque in the marsh city of Pesaro, said that they were protesting the wild and uncontrolled immigration choking the country. We're not going to allow communities of immigrants to commit crimes that remain unpunished or open activities that take our money, especially when thousands of companies managed by Italians close every day, Forza Nuova chapter head Cristian Sancini said. These places of worship can easily become meeting places for non-European criminals. Italians risk becoming a minority and confined to ghettos, he said. Forza Nuova on their website list 8 points for which they are fighting. Repeal of laws abortion. Family and population growth at the centre of policy. block immigration and start a human return, outlawing of Seven and Masonry, eradication of wear and zero debt, recovering the Church-State Agreement of 1929, repeal of laws liberticide and left and scalper, formation of corporations for the protection of workers. Worldday says, although my Italian is non-existent and Google Translate is far from perfect, their agenda doesn't sound extreme. It doesn't sound right-wing. It sounds right. France and Germany snub Cameron on EU law review. UK Prime Minister David Cameron's attempt to get other member states to participate in a general review of EU laws has suffered an embarrassing rebuff from Paris and Berlin. France and Germany have refused to take part in Cameron's much publicised examination of whether some EU powers should be returned to member states, reports the Financial Times. The paper notes that Paris and Berlin consulted with one another on the issue before concluding that the exercise, known as the balance of competences, was more to serve Britain's domestic political interests. Bison will roam forests in Germany again. This month a German prince will open the gates of an enclosure on his 30,000-acre spread and make history. Prince Richard of Sayn-Wittgenstein-Berlberg intends to let loose a small herd of European bison, a bull, 5 cows and 2 calves, a move that will mark the first time the animals have roamed freely in Western Europe in about 300 years, reports NPR. The bison, called wisents, are similar in size to their American cousins, although they're taller and weigh a bit less. We know them from the old Western movies, says the mayor of Bad Berlberg. To experience them in the wild will be fascinating. The prince and his son will work with scientists at Warsaw University to track the herd and try to make sure they don't cause damage to local farms and local cows. In time they hope to see the herd expand and split in two. If it doesn't work we'll have to take them away, but it will work, said the younger prince. World News. Arabs have black slaves today. Writing in an opposing editorial for Arutz Sheva, Dr. Charles Jacob says anti-Israel propagandists have inverted reality in minds of Westerners. Israel Apartheid Week has come and gone this year in many American campuses. It was of course a hoax. However much one says that Arabs in Israel suffer, and whoever is to blame for that alleged suffering, there is no apartheid in Israel. Meanwhile in Sudan and Mauritania, racist Arab societies enslave blacks. Today most of the slaves are African Muslims. Yet there is no Arab apartheid work on American campuses. Why not? One might think American student activists would be upset about Mauritania, the West African country with the largest population of black slaves in the world. Estimates range from 100,000 to more than 500,000. In Mauritania, slaves are used for labour, sex and breeding. The wholly owned property of their masters, they are passed down through generations, given as wedding gifts or exchanged for camels, trucks, guns or money. Surely life is not so good in a Palestinian Arab refugee camp, no matter who is to blame, but it's undeniably a whole lot worse for Mauritanian slaves. Only in America. From Pastor Robert Angus. In New York a man raped his wife, and when he went to court he told the judge that under Sharia law the wife could never refuse him for any reason, so the judge did nothing to him. What he did was declare religious freedom, even though that freedom violates our laws. Why did that court disregard the laws of the United States? But because there was such an outcry about that decision, the decision was reversed, but the judge is still sitting on the bench. He should have been removed. We see Muslims pushing their Sharia all over America in different ways, and the most dangerous aspect of that is that even city officials won't do anything about it. Take Dearborn, Michigan, where the largest concentration of Muslims in the USA live. In the city of Dearborn it's illegal to ring church bells. Why? Because church bells are offensive to Muslims. Yet they have loudspeakers all over the city where you can hear the call to prayer 5 times a day. In Hartford, Connecticut, Muslim leaders met with the city leaders and told them there would be no proselytization within a 4-block radius of a mosque, yet they can go anywhere in the city and seek converts. Remember, they believe that they are above the law. We are seeing Islam beginning to be taught in the public schools in America. The C-Scope program, which is in 45 states and 80% of the schools in Texas, are teaching that our founders are terrorists, the Boston Tea Party, and that the jihadists, the ones that flew the plane into the World Trade Center, were freedom fighters. That system is teaching that Allah is God. That system requires the girls to wear burqas, learn quotes out of the Quran, learn Muslim chants, but in those same schools you can't even have a picture of Jesus hanging in the hallway because of separation of church and state. World says it's not only in America, this is happening in the UK, Europe and around the world. Western civilization as we know it is falling, and we are allowing the quiet capitulation of our societies and governments to this evil threat. You would have thought the Americans, who bore the brunt of the most terrible terrorist act in recent history, would not have put up with this at all. Victoria's Secret hypersexualises teenage girls. Victoria's Secret has sunk to a new low, and blogger Marsha West didn't think that was possible. Recently the retailer introduced a line of intimate apparel they're calling Bright Young Things. The new line is designed to appeal to teens and tween girls. In the spring line you'll find an array of panties from lace-backed cheeksters with the word wild on the back, to a lace-trimmed thong with call me on the front, to green and white polka dot hipsters reading feeling lucky. So the decision makers at Victoria's Secret see nothing wrong with targeting middle and high school girls for the purpose of purchasing lace-trimmed thongs with call me emblazoned on the front. Thought for the day: a shift in Brit culture? This country, or rather its people, have and are undergoing a change or shift in culture and priorities, and in many ways this change is not for the best. It is a change that is being deliberately brought about by a combination of financial, socio and religious engineering, and we are now witnessing almost the completion of this negative propaganda which has been in place since the end of the last war. I've spoken many times of the whys and wherefores of what has happened and the people that I believe are stirring the melting pot. These are people who have no fondness for their country or its people, but who, a great majority of the public, believe do so. They can ignore the headlines, where allowed, of a decreasing amount of social cohesion and what they term integration. Of course the reasons for such are rarely explored in their entirety. It is reported in the World how Islamisation is creeping on its belly into the roots of America through the ordinary people there, and how we thought that the one country who would resist Islam to the last man seems to have the same sort of guilt complex that most of the Western world has, which is entirely misplaced in my opinion. A programme some time ago on the so-called honour killing of Banaz Mahmoud highlighted the plight of women from Kurdish communities in Western countries, but had ridiculous comments from Nazir Afzal that this sort of barbarity has been going on for centuries and crossed religions and cultures. Well, it has, but it doesn't cross many religions or cultures, just the Islamic and Arab cultures actually. The fact that the father of Banaz paid her brother money to kill her elder sister when she left home isn't of course indicative of the sort of people we're dealing with now in this country, is it? The fact that Banaz's cousins raped her before they slowly killed her is also how these men think of their own women, as having to be subservient at all time so that their honour is upheld is not only out of date but irrelevant to the law of murder. We as a society have taken on millions of peoples of different cultures and religions to this country, and yet we have not been given the chance to protest, let alone told how to cope with these non-integrated communities which are growing ever larger as I speak. We're demonised as the right-wing party in this country. You can talk to anyone who's moaning about the present and past governments and listen while they crap on, but if you say, why don't you vote for the British National Party, as we seem to think alike, and they practically pee their pants in horror. When in fact and truth most people out there in the sheeple's void do share our views, but they seem too afraid to actually do something about them, which is the result of the plan that the other parties who have all shared governments for the last 60 years came up with to stop us in our tracks. It didn't of course, but it was a simple plan. In 2009 we had a huge membership, publicity coming out of the wazoo, and were doing well in local elections. UKIP was the laughing stock, especially when Farage had his plane crash. So the powers that be decided to do several things. First they engineered the Equality Commission to sue us because our constitution was considered racist, even though the EU were bringing out similar powers a year later which would have covered all political parties. But we now live in a sue for money society and ahead it went. It cost us thousands and the taxpayer probably more, and in the end we changed our constitution anyway because of the EU stance. Now for the government that caused a few things to happen. Some of our old guard left because that particular change didn't appeal to them, and it cost us money that a political party who does not rely on handouts from governments or corporations can afford. We had to stop our membership channels for 4 months. You see how the Conservatives would fare under that one. We survived and we will survive, but fair, in the words of a pal, a black man's behind is never fair. Then immediately after our chairman got into the EU, did you notice that all publicity stopped dead? Another ruse. If something is not in the paper over a course of several years, apart from 1 or 2 derogatory paragraphs, the sheeples will forget it. That was the intention. But some local papers kept up the good work, but according to many people in the street, we had stopped functioning. Not so, but a well-planned way to turn people away from the truth and a common sense party. Then of course they built and hyped up and paid Farage for his anti-EU party. Well, if you fall for that one you aren't worth a nationalist thought. Farage when sober is more racist and elitist than any Golden Dawn or right-wing party. Just clever, just much cleverer at hiding it, and of course very well paid from your tax money. You might as well vote for him as you're paying for him anyway. Now we all know this has happened. You know it's happened, and yet why are the sheeples still turning the other cheek? Well, the establishment have come up with a few other gems to blight this country with, and in fact I believe are seeing just how much they can get away with before even the Brits turn either to us nationalists or get really angry, which isn't a Brit thing at all. Massive immigration, which despite several well-chosen words from Cameron, will not be halted, capped, stopped, monitored, checked or anything along similar lines, ever, until we get into power. Benefits, the changes will go ahead despite affecting the most vulnerable in our society, and the only people to benefit will be the immigrant families with their hordes of children. You and I will not be allowed a spare room because there is a Mohammed somewhere who needs it. It's his human rights, isn't it? Put that with an education system that's going to the dogs, a national health service which is fastly becoming an international health service despite maunderings from above, land and businesses becoming every day only obtainable by foreigners, and you have a deliberate decimation of a culture and people by their own. Of course these people needed the help of the sheeples, and they got it. Complete acceptance of all the above, and indeed in some cases encouraging cheap workers in. A government official spoke on the radio this morning about the awful case of Nick Philpott, who burnt his old children, well some of them, to death and benefit fraud, and she said that 0.7% figure for fraud is good. But how much of this is from newcomers? We have always had, as other countries do, our really nasty men and women who do truly horrible things for money. But even in the UK today this particular case is really evil. Only in a society that allows whole families to live off other people's money and breed more children to do so would this case have occurred. In this country we give money away to breeders who are usually not breeding either Brits or Brits with brains. How a guy can set fire to a house knowing that some of his children are sleeping leaves me stupefied. And it was probably down to money because they were his ex-mistress's children and she would have got the child benefit had she left his home. What sort of society do we run here, where the elderly are penalised for living too long, our own children are hungry, we have workers who cannot or will not work, there is a press embargo on nationalists, where people are frightened of their own jobs if their employers know their true allegiances, where schools are too coward to either discipline their brats or teach both British children and newcomers British history and religion, where the average kid thinks Superman is real and Winston Churchill is a comic character, where Christian religious holidays are frowned upon, where church bells are not rung anymore, and much more. And yet some Brits actually think they don't need nationalists. But most of all it is the total evil of what some people are inflicting on their own people and making them think it is for their own good that's beyond me and our party. So next time your neighbour or friend whittles on about benefits, benefit fraud, immigration and the takeover of his neighbourhood, the latest mosque being built near him, halal food being served at his local eatery, pubs going out of business, petrol and food price rises, just look at him and ask two things. Does he use his vote? And if not, why not? And if so, why doesn't he vote for us? We in the British National Party are a constant. Our manifesto doesn't change with the wind or by virtue of who pays us the most. We have survived the above and we will survive the future. But will the British sheeple survive? That is the question. To be or not to be, therein lies the rub. Finally, the bacon condom has arrived. More than most other products, condoms seem to arouse people's creative ingenuity. They are glow-in-the-dark condoms, Scotch whisky flavoured McCondoms, dinosaur-shaped condoms and condoms printed with ruler measurements, presumably for men who feel they have something to prove. And now a bacon condom. It was only a matter of time. J&D's Foods, whose corporate mission statement is everything should taste like bacon, has announced its latest product, a condom that's patterned to look like a pinkish red slab of bacon and is flavoured with the company's bacon lube, according to the New York Daily News. I can barely read this, I'm laughing so much. The company claims the condoms are made in America of the highest quality latex and rigorously tested to help ensure the utmost reliability and safety for when you're making bacon, Fox News reports. This presenter says, I prefer my bacon with hash browns and a large cup of tea. We should issue these to all the mosques throughout the UK and then they wouldn't have the chance to outbreed us. Definitely not halal. You've been listening to The World at 8. I am Lynn Mozart and I wish you all a very good night. Just go easy on the bacon sarnies.